I'm talking today to Kevin Webb from Conveyal. Kevin, what does Conveyal do?
We build open software solutions leveraging open data to solve transport problems.
And where did that process start? How did open transport come about?
It's an interesting space. It's actually evolved out of work that a number of transit agencies have been doing to modernize their kind of internal operational emphasis in a way that's more public facing. So in the mid 2000s, a number of transport agencies, particularly Portland TriMet, who we work with very closely, started a collaboration with a number of big tech companies, for example, Google, that got very interested in mapping, and they were trying to figure out ways to bring internal operational information out to the public in a way that could be incorporated into the kind of ubiquitous web maps that we see now. And that necessitated the development of open data standards that allowed cities to communicate in clear, concise ways, in consistent ways across different communities about their transport operations, and that evolved what we now know as the General Transit Feed Specification, or GTFS, a data standard that's used in over 500 cities around the world now to provide public information about transport.
And typically, how do the public information systems work?
So this is it starts inside, in a kind of a traditional kind of formal bus system like we see in North America or Europe. It starts inside the operations departments where they are managing their schedules and their driver coordination, and they're cutting what they call the kind of daily schedule, the run cut, generating a schedule that the public the public then would care about, and so basically translating that into information that's useful not just in terms of where the buses are and where they're running, but how you'd actually use the system. And that data is generated using this GTFS standard and then communicated out to the public so they can build applications. Third-party developers often take the data. For example, Google consumes it, brings it into Google Maps, and builds public tools. Other developers using a variety of systems, including open source software that my company's been involved with, have also built mobile applications, SMS interfaces, all sorts of things that the public then benefits from that leverage this data that's being generated by these internal operations systems.
Matt, all forms of transport.
This is the work that we've done has started out primarily thinking about public transport and the way that those have been run, particularly in North America and in Europe. But we're actually seeing those systems in those parts of the world change quite a bit. We're actually, for example, in Washington D.C., where we are now, there's a whole new host of transport options that are really fundamentally different than the way traditional transport runs. We have car shares, we have dynamic bike sharing systems that are changing throughout the day. People are making use of and incorporating in their journeys. There's also walking and biking and infrastructure that the city's building to support those that also require data to be created. And those are really the data are really fundamental to the user community to understand how those systems work and to help them build a picture that integrates those together into a cohesive whole. And so a lot of the work we've done began with public transport, has now evolved into a much more complex kind of multimodal picture of how cities work, and the ability to model them as a system has really evolved along with the data that's been created. And it's a really exciting space because of that, because these data layers are now being connected together to provide a multimodal, kind of multifaceted picture of the city.